This episode features a paper by Anthony Geraghty, Lieutenant Commander in the Irish Naval Service. His paper, Irish Naval Service Operations in the Mediterranean.
So basically what I'll do is I'll talk to you about the kind of migrant routes, who operates in the area down there, the Irish deployment, our concept of operations down there, the types of boats we rescue people from, and then I'll try and, as best as I can, link it into Dockland encounters for you. Just to give you kind of a health warning that this is my own opinion. So at the end, when there's a Q&A, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Irish government or even the Department of Defence or the Defence Forces. It's myself. We have a very direct way of speaking in the military, and we always give the bluff, the bottom line up front. But just what was said this morning was the fact that there are lots of different people out at sea. But the one thing that does bind us together, if you spend time at sea, is that the obligation to render assistance to those in peril or lost at sea is one of the oldest and most deeply rooted maritime traditions. And for centuries, seafarers have considered it a duty to assist fellow mariners in distress on the high seas. So effectively, as a professional mariner, or even as a part-time mariner or the merchant marine or in fishing vessels, if you know somebody's in distress, you will immediately go to their rescue. It's in your blood, it's in your DNA. You cannot help yourself. It's just one of those things. And also, as a state ship or a flagship, you also have a legal obligation. So it's not just a matter of turning a blind eye. You are legally obliged to rescue people. So that effectively is the kind of migrant routes down there. But particularly that area there, circled in red, is effectively where Irish Naval Service operations are. You're talking from the Libyan coast right up to the Sicilian coast, or eventually where we're asked to drop them off, and we'll kind of drill down a bit further down into it. Some of you as well will be used to looking at videos of boats with migrants and coming ashore on beaches. That's actually on the kind of Turkish-Greek side of things. So that's a different area. We're not involved in that area at all. We're in the Libyan route there. So it's a very large area, and kind of important to know who's there. You effectively have the Italian Navy. They have a task group down there permanently. You have the Italian Coast Guard. They're down there as well. You have EUNAVFOR Med, that's the European Naval Force Mediterranean, are down there. They have a force, ships, we will deal with that. Frontex are the European Border Agency. They don't operate quite far south, they're further north, effectively from a border point of view for the entire Mediterranean, but on the northern side of it. There's a whole series of non-governmental organisations down there. Most of you are familiar with MSF. They're the kind of largest actor down there. There's oil rig, resupply vessels. There's a lot of fishing vessels down there as well. Mediterranean is a very rich fisheries ground, or at least it should be. A lot of merchant ships down there. There's the Libyan Coast Guard. Obviously with Libya there's a whole series of different governments down there, and there's a whole series of different coast guards down there, so you're not really quite sure most of the time who in fact you're dealing with, and that has other complications as well. There's the platforms in distress and the smugglers as well. Smugglers don't normally come out past 12 miles because the United Nations Security Council resolution decided that EUNAVFOR wouldn't be allowed within 12 miles. So that's why the smugglers are quite happy to literally go to the 12-mile limit. That's the territorial waters, international law. And then there's Ireland. So as you can see, even at that, it's kind of a very complex environment with a lot of issues, a lot of different actors there, a lot of actors acting independently, a lot of actors cooperating, but a lot not cooperating. So it's a complex enough environment. So you have, I suppose most important is the Italian Coast Guard, the Italian Navy. Italy's had a kind of a standing force in the Mediterranean for a long time. A lot of national interests. They have interests in fisheries. They have interests in their own nationals working on oil rigs down there. They have interests in smuggling through the Mediterranean. So they have a standing force down there all the time. Migrants coming across the Mediterranean is not a recent thing. It's recent for the English community because it's only the last couple of years that they've really paid much interest in it. But there have been people trying to go through the Mediterranean for hundreds of years. And the Italians have had some dealing with it. But in April 2015, Italy set up an operation called Mare Sicuro. and that basically was trying to deal with the huge numbers of people who were suddenly trying to make the journey through. Obviously, as a result of things like the Arab Spring, effectively Syria and the state it's in, and the African nations in general, and a lot of stuff that's going on down there. They normally have 4 to 6 kind of fairly serious capital warships down there. They have maritime patrol aircraft, they have unmanned aerial vehicles, and they have a lot of submarines down there as well. Next main actor is UNAVFOR Med. Their operation is called Sophia. That's the baby Sophia there. She was born on a German frigate before they named the operation. They had initial operational capability in 7th of July 2016 and full operational capability the 28th. They operate under United Nations Security Council resolution, which is Chapter 7, which is on the high seas only. The high seas are effectively outside of territorial waters from 12 miles out. So they can't deploy any assets inside of 12 miles. So if you've got smugglers bringing boats out and you have a line, they can't come in and tackle them. So that's kind of a major problem. The UN hasn't changed that Security Council resolution, so that's still the way it is. And their main effort is to neutralise human smuggling and trafficking and stop the assets being used for that. It's a difficult enough operation. They're doing their best within the realms of the Security Council resolution. They normally have a carrier, which is the large ship there in the top right. That's the force headquarters at sea. And then they have a series of countries contributing assets. The Dutch, the Spanish, the French, the Belgians, the UK, a couple of subs, the Italians are supporting them as well. The carrier is actually an Italian carrier. So as you can see, Italy's putting up a lot of assets down there. There's support ships down there, survey ships, patrol boats, and a fair few air assets. They'd have rotary wing helos on and off ships, and they'd have fixed wing as well, maritime patrol aircraft operating out of there. And Ireland is not part of the UNAVFOR Med, so we're effectively operating singly down there, which obviously has its own complications with that. Frontex are down there as well. Their Operation Triton, like I said, they tend not to come down too far south, but we do interact with them, particularly if we're transferring. If you pick up migrants, you don't necessarily always bring them ashore. You would effectively be told by the Italian Coast Guard where to bring them, and where you bring them may in fact be an Operation Triton ship. So there could be a day where there could be 2,000 people rescued in a particular day. A number of ships would act as kind of nodes, and you'd bring your people over to them. Ireland isn't a member of Frontex, obviously, because we're not part of Schengen. And it's border control only, and SAR effectively, search and rescue, is a kind of a secondary obligation for them under safety of life at sea. I suppose it's the legal basis of the moral obligation that I spoke about earlier on. And they're generally deployed in the Italian and Maltese coastal zones, so they don't move too far south. From that being said, they have a lot of assets. They could have anything up to 6 offshore patrol vessels, so that size of ship, they don't own anything themselves, they just charter them out. Kind of smaller vessels, they'd have maybe 3 aircraft at any one time, a couple of rotary wings, various teams briefing and screening people, etc. A lot of NGOs down there. So you have Migrant Offshore Station, MOAS. There's Sea-Watch, which is a very wealthy German man, decided to hire a ship and send it down there. You have MSF are down there, 1 or 2 ships most of the time. And remember, MSF also have various hospitals or first aid posts on the ground in Libya as well, so they're heavily involved down there. And we all operate in the same area. So I think you can kind of get an idea of how complicated the picture gets. So back basically in 2015, as a result of a capsize of a vessel that was filmed by CNN, where about 600 people drowned, there was an international outcry. There was some various meetings in Brussels, and Ireland wanted to figure out what it could do, and it was decided that we would send a ship down. This was 3 years on, but at the time we would send a ship down. So the very first ship to go was the Elietna, who's down there at the moment, and that's just kind of a range of the ships that we have sent down there. And we call it Operation Pontus. And that's the Samuel Beckett, beside the Samuel Beckett Bridge. And that's the ship I was captain of when we went down. Actually, interesting dockland encounter. You got the convention centre. That was called the convention centre in the background, yeah. Okay, so how do we operate down there? We effectively, if you're sending troops overseas, the way it is in Ireland, there's effectively what's called a triple lock. You have a Security Council resolution, you have approval of the Dáil, and you have approval of the Seanad. However, for humanitarian work, under the Defence Act, we can deploy people or assets. So effectively, a little known to you maybe, but for me it's a very important document, the Defence Act. But under section 348 of that, we can send people on humanitarian tasks. So the way we do it is that there's a diplomatic note called a note verbale, and that's a diplomatic note arranged through the Department of Foreign Affairs with the Italian government, and it basically lays out our acceptance of the fact that, and their acceptance will be down there, that we will pick up people, that we liaise with the Coast Guard, liaise with the Italian Navy, and we will bring them ashore to Italy. We normally deploy ships for approximately 3 months. So we had 3 ships in 2015, 3 ships for 3 months in 2016. The Ellie Etna is there at the moment. She's being replaced by the Ellie William Butler Yeats, who's sailing next month. And then later on during the year, around September, a 3rd ship will most likely be going down. So effectively, we've a presence down there for nearly 9 months of the year. We cooperate and coordinate with the Italian Coast Guard, and that's how we do our business, and we'll get onto that a bit more. And then once the search and rescue is declared, we deal directly with the Italian Marine Rescue Coordination Centre. So to kind of give you a feel of the ship that I was on, she was commissioned in April 14, and the ship was down there from the 24th of September to the 19th of December. December is always a nice time to come home because you're coming home for Christmas as well. The ship was 90 metres long, 14 metre beam, it draws 4.2 metres, so I need 4.2 metres under the waterline down, about 2,200 tonnes, very large steel box. Crew of about 59. Normally in home waters I'd only had about 45. But when you're away for that length of time and you need to be kind of self-sustainable, you need a lot of techies on board, kind of heavy maintenance required, full medic team. So I'd have normally had 1 paramedic on the ship for home waters, 4 paramedics down there, full diving team, 5 diving capability. The kind of logistics tail needs to be upped as well, so catering, etc. is kind of cranked up a bit. The ship can do about 23 knots and has a range of about 8,000 nautical miles. People always ask about water. I was able to make 14,000 litres of water a day, so not really concerned from that point of view. What we have there is we effectively have the kind of search and rescue area off the Libyan coast there, and each area is kind of divided into sectors. So effectively you're asked to go into a particular sector. So what is that we're actually required to do? We're required to conduct search and rescue and humanitarian operations. We're required to comply with all obligations under UNCLOS, United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. Okay, it's a legal document that I particularly am required to abide by, and people in the Merchant Marine would be quite familiar with it as well. We're required to cooperate with the Italian Coast Guard, the Italian Navy, and Marine Rescue Coordination Centre. Although we didn't come under the formal chain of command of the Italian Navy, there was an admiral effectively on a destroyer, and he was coordinating our actions down there. So he'd effectively request me from the previous slide to go to a particular sector, and then just cooperate with arrangements. Kind of interesting things. Environmental conditions are very different down there than they would be at home waters. Sea temperature is about 26 degrees, which sounds great, except when you're trying to keep machinery going, and you're suddenly the water you're taking in to cool your machinery is 26 degrees. It's a bit more complicated from an engineering point of view. And air temperatures are 26 to about 35 degrees. That's external. Aircon worked very well, which is great. A lot of sand in the rain, which we wouldn't be used to at home, so a lot of external, like the optical systems, that kind of thing, radars, would need to be cleaned a lot more often. Water spouts, never see water spouts in home waters, but you get them a lot down there. Excessive heat on deck, big steel box, flat deck, painted grey, gets very hot. But fewer boat failures because the conditions are a lot nicer, and it's all about the weather. It's great down there. Ships, when you construct them, aren't designed for humanitarian operations, so you basically need to kind of adapt them, and timber and shipwrights are great people. So effectively we had a thing called a decon zone, a decontamination zone, and we had to build structures for people to change into protective clothing. So that's kind of an example there of wellies and very GoPro cameras and various bits of stuff. Shells and shells of sanitized cleaner, life jackets, communications, all sorts of things. We also have examples there, guy dressed up. Basically, I get asked about that a lot, and I get asked, is it not a bit intimidating for people when they come on board a ship to be greeted with someone like that? The reality is I have a two-way duty of care. I have a duty of care to my own people on the ship, that they don't contract anything, and I also have a duty of care to the people we're rescuing. We have coughs and sneezes and diseases that they don't have, and vice versa. The bottom line is that if an individual of my crew got an infection and he's inside in the ship, 2 or 3 people get it in a steel box, it would go through the ship rapidly. The ship would have to come off station for a period of time, and I would be explaining to the Taoiseach why I didn't implement my hygiene protocols. So, that's the reality. That's the outside of that box as well. So people, when we had migrants on board, my own crew used to basically go in and out of that door, and that door only would go through a decontamination process going in and out. A couple of toilets there. Obviously, I could have 800 or 900 people on deck, so you effectively have to construct temporary toilets, and that's what's used. It's amazing what a 25-litre drum can be turned into from a urinal point of view. Talk about shelter as well. We'd have a kind of netting on the superstructure to try and keep the place cool. So what kind of boats are we dealing with? We're effectively dealing with 2 types. The first type is the rubber boat. They're about 10 to 14 metres long. They're manufactured in someone's back garden. So as you can imagine, they're kind of poorly manufactured. Scaffolding boards on the deck. They have a brand new outboard motor. They'd have no food or water. They'd have no safety life at sea equipment, so no life jackets, no VHF radio, no flares, no nothing. And they could have 80 to 120 people on board. And they're sinking. Second type are timber barges. These are effectively old fishing boats that are loosely use the word converted. Converted to what? They can be any length. They're modified fishing boats. They have an inboard diesel motor. Again, no food or water. They'd have no safety of life at sea equipment. They could have 250 to 550. We've even found them with 700-800 people on board, and no one has a life jacket. Okay, that's the reality, and they're sinking. Okay, this is an image of one that the Eddie Neve came across in July 2015. They were tasked to go to it. What's kind of unusual about it is you'll notice that it kind of looks like a fishing vessel as far as still as the derricks. The main superstructure wasn't taken off it. And Steve, a lot of people maybe a bit higher than they should be. Next picture is a bit distressing, but the next picture is a whole series of people drowning. That particular boat, there were 34 bodies recovered from the sea. There was about 200 people recovered safely, and the way they fill those boats effectively is there's a hold down below, and I don't use the expression lightly, but they get beaten into them and then the hold is locked. They don't know how many people drowned in that boat, but they think, just talking to people who were interviewed afterwards or just kind of spoken to, they think maybe there was 250, 300 people drowned in that particular one, and that's just one of the ones we came across. Just people drowning on a kind of a daily basis. So they depart from the beaches, basically, or harbours, and you could have days where there'd be nobody leaving, and then you could have days where there'd be thousands of people leaving. Okay? What they seem to be doing these days is that they seem to be stacking them and stacking them and stacking them and releasing them all at the same time, effectively to overwhelm people down there. Because if you're EU NAVFOR Med and your job is to neutralise smugglers, if you're too busy pulling people out of the water, you don't have the resources to be looking to smugglers. That's just we think something's coming on. But it can be a function of lots of things. It can be a function of the number of people on the beach, supply of barges, the supply of rubber boats, supply of engines, etc. So that's just that area there, and a kind of a satellite image there, so kind of a large beach. So literally boats would be inflated on the beach, engine put on them, and they're sent out. They're normally towed out to about kind of 10, 11 miles, and then they're just given a compass and told to steer north. They would normally have a satellite phone, and with that satellite phone they'd ring the only number in the satellite phone, but the problem then is they're told to ditch the phone. Okay, so you're given a rough position that they may or may not be in. They may drive around for a couple of hours before you actually find them, so trying to find them is kind of difficult enough as well, because they're in small boats. So a radar is only effective to about 1.5 miles in a rubber boat like that. Thermal imaging at night is very good, but thermal imaging will only give you, might extend the range out to about 2.5 miles. It's a very large sea and it's a very small boat. okay, functional environmental conditions, and then the fighting along the Libyan coast as well. There'd be days where you'd be kind of 15, 20 miles off the Libyan coast and it looks like a firework display, and in fact what it is fighting. And obviously if there's been fighting that day, there'd be nobody pushed off the beach the following day, but a day or two later things could start cranking up. And like I said, you could have a day where there could be 100 people sent on a beach, or there could be a day where there could be 2,000. So how do you find them? Okay, it's very difficult. The Italian Coast Guard may have information, and they may have got that from a call from a sat phone. The Italian Navy may have come across them. Your own sensors may have come across them as well. But after a while, you get to build up a picture. If you see there's a couple of lines. They're kind of timelines. The lower one, kind of from east to west, is a 0400 line. There's a 0500 line and a 0600 line. So effectively, if they've been released from the beach, they're only released around the same time, which is kind of after midnight. So effectively, if you kind of follow those lines, you can come across them. Now, it's a bit more scientific than just literally falling over them. But the thing to do is to find them as quickly as you can, because the reality in those boats, they're probably 2 to 4 hours away from dying. And that's the reality down there. But experienced as well, if you watch MSF, if you're at sea and you suddenly see one of the MSF ships or one of the other NGOs rapidly going south, you know there's something happening. So if you just clutch in a second engine and switch on the gas and head down, you can kind of pick them up quite quickly. Okay, so STAR operations. Effectively, as a ship's captain, I've got kind of 3 things I'm worried about when these things are going on. I'm trying to safely get these people on board. I'm trying to protect my ship from external threats, because I don't know who's around me. There's fast craft all the time. People down there, not migrants obviously, but people in small for fast craft, Libyan Coast Guard, etc., they carry weapons like we carry mobile phones. Okay? I'm not used to seeing people in boats with weapons, so I have to presume it's a threat. So I'm trying to protect my own ship. I'm also trying to protect it internally from contaminants, etc. And then I'm also liaising with the Italian Navy and the Italian Coast Guard. So we basically cut the operation into 4 phases. We've kind of internal actions, external actions, recovery, and transfer to POS. The POS is a place of safety. So the first thing we do is that we have internal actions, and as kind of preparations, we lock down the ship. Okay? All the doors are locked, and that's kind of a defence in death. We do our deck preparations. Guys get into their gear, they get the admin stuff ready, the medics check their kit. We start making sure the boats are okay, we get the life jackets into the boats, etc. The PPE, the personal protective equipment, cannot overemphasise the importance of that. The force protection, you literally get all the weapon systems manned on the ship, because you need to be certain that you can protect the ship and also protect other people as well. If we come across a migrant vessel and we don't like the look of people in the area, we may very well have to take action to protect them. And then we liaise with the Marine Rescue Coordination Centre and the Italian Navy. Kind of phase 2 is external actions. So at that stage, what you do is you maintain a distance and you launch 2 boats. And those boats effectively act as a barrier between you and the platform you're going to rescue. And again, it's to kind of keep them at a distance, because they do get excited. It's not unusual for them to see a ship and jump into the water and start swimming to you. Do you know? You make contact with them and you have to do an assessment. You're looking at how many are there, how many women, children, any medical issues, what kind of state of cooperation are they in, what condition are they in. And then the next thing is you will declare a search and rescue, and you'll hand over personal flotation devices. When you see pictures of our operations, you'll see them in the boats with life jackets on. That's because we've given it to them. Okay? Up to that point, they do not have life jackets. And at that stage, you take a breath. Okay? Because at that stage, they are relatively safe at that stage, or slightly safer. You just kind of slow the ship down, slow yourself down, and take stock of what's happened. Next thing then is that we effectively embark, it's like the Titanic, we embark women and children first, and we get as many of them as we can into one of our boats. Boats I was operating using down there, we could get about 25 to 27 people on board at any one time on the ribs. So what you do is that you fill one rib and you go back to the ship. The other rib stands by but doesn't get close to the platform, because what will happen is they will try and jump in. So you got to keep your distance, A, to discourage them from jumping in, and B, if somebody does jump in, you got to be able to pick them out of the water and put them back, in fact, on the platform. Literally babies, they are babies. They were about, I think, 2 months old. The boat that has embarked them, the ship's boat, goes to the ship, and we embark them via either a pilot ladder or an embarkation ladder. An embarkation ladder is a kind of a set of steps that goes down over the side of the ship, or a pilot ladder would be that situation there. Normally we wouldn't have to pull people up like that, but some people, they're just exhausted at that stage and they need assistance on board. And then once empty, the rib goes back to the platform, the other rib starts filling, and you effectively leapfrog back and forth like that. Hopefully you'll get it done in about five runs. Okay, phase 3 is effectively onboard care. First thing that happens, take a life jacket off and they're searched. Okay, now you're dealing with some people arrive on board in a pair of underpants and a t-shirt, but other people have clothing on and you have to search them. Okay, these people have probably been on the road for 3 to 6 months. Yeah, they've had to protect themselves, so you are taking knives off them, you're taking 6-inch nails off them, you're taking all sorts of things off them. Again, it's a two-way duty of care. If a fight develops on deck and someone gets stabbed because my guys didn't take a knife off somebody, I've got some serious explaining to do. And then equally, if my guys got stabbed, got some explaining to do. So we search and we take the weapons off them. We give them triage and medical care if required. Some people are fine, others have mild dehydration and a whole series of other things. Go through administration, okay? The Italians normally want to know roughly how many people you have, what nationalities are they, and numbers of children, etc. So we try as much as we can to get as much data as we can off them. Literally, we have a map on the bulkhead which asks them to point what country you're from. We give them water, food, constant care. As the captain of a warship, I'd never thought I'd have babies, formula and nappies on board. It's not something I'm used to. I'm used to sticking on ammunition. I'm not used to stocking up on nappies and baby formula. But you have to do lots of things, and effectively that's what you're hoping for, I suppose, is a happy outcome. UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, defines a pause as a place of safety. It doesn't necessarily say a place of safety is land. Okay, what it has to be is, it has to be a place that you believe as the ship's captain that if you drop people off to, they're not in imminent peril. Okay, so a place of safety can be an Italian Navy ship, a place of safety can be an Italian Coast Guard ship, it could be an EU NAVFOR ship, it could be a Frontex ship, or it could be one of the NGO ships as well. We've brought people over to NGO ships, we brought them back, we've done the same with the Italian Coast Guard, we've done the same with the Italian Navy. What that is there is, that's people being disembarked from the Beckett, and there's a Frontex ship stern there, and they're being brought over there, and that's the other view from the front of that boat, then being brought over, and that's the Frontex ship that they're being brought to. So I don't know, is that a dockland encounter? I'm not sure. Depends. Again, somebody said this morning, how do you define a dockland? Who said that? Yeah, effectively, how do you define a dockland? Okay, so we also bring them to a port, a place of safety, and that's effectively as directed by the Italian Coast Guard. The Italian Ministry for Interior are the government department who are in charge of this, and they would say, okay, you are to bring them to port X. We normally have them on board for 24 to 48 hours. They're on deck for all of that, but we look after them as best as we can. There's medical care available from a triage point of view. We feed them, we give them space blankets, we look after them as best as we can. We give the kids cuddly toys. Don't get me wrong, we're not NGOs, but we have to look after people in a human way as best as we can. So what does a pause look like? Well, in a port, and I suppose this is your dockland encounter, it's effectively a small little village that's set up in a relatively short period of time. You could have anything from, normally you wouldn't have small numbers on board, you might have 300-400 uppers, and these 300 or 400 plus people suddenly descend on the shore. So you've the first Red Cross be there, you'd have the Italian police, the Italian immigration services, could be Interpol, could be there, a whole series of things. we don't have a lot of experience from the shore side of things, because our responsibility is to get them to the quay wall. We're not involved in the processing side at all. If any of you have an academic interest in that, it's the Italian Ministry of the Interior you'd need to talk to. But effectively, they're processed there. So what I wanted to do then is I'm kind of conscious of the fact that it's dockland encounters. So I did a bit of research and I got a series of images from dockland to dockland. The first dockland being the Libyan coast, and the last dockland being what you saw there a second ago, and the bits and pieces in between. So that's effectively a series of people waiting on a beach in Libya. A fella there with a gun standing up. All sorts of interesting images there. Those people will tell lots of different stories. Some of those people could have been on the road for 3 to 6 months. Harsh reality. There's a couple of UN reports you can read on it. These people have been subjected to beatings, robberies, organ harvesting, rape, murder, theft. Whole series of very, very unpleasant things. But they got themselves that far. If that's steerage class, I suppose that's first class, as best as it gets. If you want to put it in those terms. That's the guy there reflecting on whatever. Maybe he's got something in his eye, or maybe he's reflecting on the last 6 months of his life. Okay, the top left hand is a baby that was born on the Eli Etna on Saturday, which is the good news story. Bottom right hand is that famous image of the child who drowned on the beach. So that kind of gives you a perspective of life and death, okay, for those people. There's also the crews on the ships and their interactions with Dockland. Those guys were probably standing on deck for 4 or 5 hours in those suits, looking after people or getting them off. Hydration is a huge problem, and the lads are just hoovering into the water there. So that's there. Okay, people coming off the ship then, the interface there I suppose is the gangway, and they get themselves on the Dockland then, and they're being effectively directed down to one of those processing areas. It's not all good news. We do bring coffins ashore, but they are treated with significant respect. If we bring a coffin ashore, there would always be still on the ship. They'd be piped off on the quay wall, and there'd be a great amount of respect for them. That's the Eli Etna on Sunday in Catania. So that's her disembarking people. Again, you can see examples there of they're coming down the gangway and they're kind of being processed immediately. You can see there the sort of shelter area on the back of the ship to provide them with some shelter. I think she had about 750 odd people on board up to Sunday when she started disembarking them. That just gives another perspective there of the quay wall. And if you look in the background, you can see apartments, you can see a marina, and there's yachts in it. So all the normal stuff going on in a dockland, and then the harsh reality of that. And then you've got the buses, okay? And effectively that probably is the last that we see of them. And they're brought away then, again in a port with a merchant ship in the background, and normal port stuff going on, normal commercial traffic in and out. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but there's a very, very good documentary called The Crossing. It was on some time back. I don't think it's on the player anymore, the RT player, but if you look hard enough on YouTube, you'll find it. It's not a pleasant viewing. If you've smallies at home, do not let them watch it. Or if you're going to let them watch it, you need to watch it yourself first of all. So that's effectively it. I know we have a question and answer session. I suppose from a professional mariner point of view, going into the Dockland thing and just listening to you this morning, one point I would say is that mariners and professional mariners have a lot of experience of docklands. If you want to know what's going to happen to a docklands in the future, talk to people who've interacted with them in a long time, in the previous times. If you want to find out what's going to happen in the future, read history. So if I can be any assistance to you from the Naval Service point of view with any research you need to do, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. From the Maritime Institute point of view, they've interactions with ourselves, they've interactions with the merchant marine, they've interactions with the fishing industry. And if I could speak for you, I'd say you'd be a very good contact to talk to as well. So that's it from my point of view. Thanks very much.